Suddenly I begin to see a bit of good luck for me, 'cause I've got a golden ticket.
All right, folks, just in a minute, we'll be talking with a good friend, Matthew Brodsky, about having the golden ticket to the big Washington event tomorrow in Washington, D.C., the UAE, Bahrain, and Israel getting together for a peace accord, a peace event. What is it exactly? We'll be talking about that in just a minute, so stay tuned. The golden ticket in Washington.
I never thought I'd see the day when I would face the world and say good morning.
Good morning.
Look at the sun. I never thought that I would be slapping the lap of luxury, 'cause I'd have said
it couldn't be done.
But it can be done. Oh, the cake, Charlie.
All right, folks, you are listening to the Yishai Fleisher Show here on Facebook, YouTube, and Twitter as well, on Periscope, and also on the Land of Israel Network and the Yishai Fleisher Show. And very excited to be with you here on the eve of the Abraham Accords. And I'm here in beautiful Judea, and I didn't get the golden ticket. The golden ticket did not come to me in the mail. I'm a little bit jealous. And I know that at the last big event that was televised from Washington, which was the deal of the century, the Peace to Prosperity announcement, well, I looked at the room and I saw a lot of my friends. And one of my friends that I saw in that event was my good friend Matthew RJ Brodsky, who was sitting in the audience there. And therefore, I'm not surprised that he also has a golden ticket for tomorrow's event as well. Matthew Brodsky has over 2 decades of experience focusing on U.S. foreign policy and national security. He has briefed members of Congress, Departments of State, Departments of Defense, and National Security Council on issues like Iran, Syria, and the Palestine-Israel problems. He's also briefed me over a food at a restaurant in Washington many times. Brodsky currently assists the National Security Council and the State Department on policy and communications strategy to promote the Trump administration's foreign policy agenda. In the past, he's been many things, including senior fellow at both the Security Studies Group and the Gold Institute for International Strategy. Brodsky has a proven track record of making an impact on policy-making community in Washington, and he joins us on the show. Matt, thanks so much for being with us.
I'm humbled, but pleasure to be with you again, Yishai.
All right. So now you're on my show today, but earlier you were actually answering questions for news outlets from the Emirates and from the GCC, and you were like booked all day with them. What were they so excited to ask you? What was on their minds as they're in Washington and they're getting to this? And maybe from their questions we could get a little bit of a sense of their mindset.
Their mindset currently is extremely pro-deal. And I have to say, since I've been doing a lot of interviews with Emirati networks and just with Middle East networks in general, I do a lot of this with on behalf of the State Department or the White House Peace Team. So for well over 2 years, I have had a sense of where questions are going from. What, in other words, what the policy thinking is at the tops of the network. And I've even noticed when I bring up Israel and their role in pushing back a common enemy in Syria, for instance, over time, where that was one of those, I would say that I myself would be kind of excited about that, but there would kind of just be a little bit of like, silence, to where we are today, which is literally, it's a new day as far as the networks are concerned. Also, as far as the guests are concerned, who I'm, sharing airtime with, the people that they are booking are extremely pro-normalization, are looking for what all of this brings. And when it comes to the Palestinian question, which incidentally was always what had to be asked next. That was every time, before a week ago, every time anything like this was brought up, it's what about the Palestinian question? What about negotiations? Blah, blah, blah. Right now, it's all sunshine and roses, and we'll see where we'll see where it leads. And, there needs to be a realistic solution. I've not heard as much quoting, for instance, of the Arab Peace Initiative from 2002, which says something quite specific, but is frankly outdated. That used to be the talking point. Anytime that there was anything involving normalization, peace process, whatever, everyone points back, if you're in the Middle East, to the well, we came up with this. And that's all changed. If what I see in the news is any indication, they're really welcoming this. And I know from Emiratis that I speak with, they're actually very excited, not just obviously for what it does with Israel, but for what it does with the United States and all the attendant messages that it sends to all the right parties around the region.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so that's I was going to hold off on the Palestinian question till later, but you brought it up. You basically are saying that used to be the issue, like whenever you talked about Arab-Israeli détente or a coming together or coalescing, it would always throw back to, well, what about this thorny issue? What about this thorny issue? How do we deal with this thorny issue? And one gets the sense, and I've written this on Twitter, and you get some pushback. One gets the sense that this whole thing is about sidestepping the thorny issue. It's like, actually, let's not ask that question right now. Let's not deal with the Palestinian problem. Let's go around and talk about other things that do bring us together. And the things that bring us together are an interest in prosperity, an interest in common defense against Iran, and also, maybe it's not going to be said anywhere, but a realization after 100 years of war with Israel from the Arab world, a realization by some parts of the Arab world that Israel is not going to be defeated. So if you can't beat them, join them and start to work ahead towards the things that will give us the things that we want, prosperity and defense, as opposed to endless and pointless war, which only retards our progress. So if anything, I get the sense that the Palestinian issue is specifically being sidelined so that we can actually get together on other issues that do bring us together. What do you think about that?
Yeah, I've actually learned over the course of 48 hours now in the run-up to this to downplay, just because even when I say it, and I'm used to having the immediate, like, well, yes, let's turn the discussion there. I say that and I'm like, it's just left on the table with, the other guest and the announcer. And so I'm like, well, if I don't need to bring it up then if they're not going to bring it up. That is a major part here, but notice on an even higher level, ideologically, how this dovetails with the Trump administration's thinking to begin with when it comes to nationalism, or in Arabic, wataniya, the very concept of the nation state, okay? This is something that if you look at Trump's policy since the beginning, he hates the UN, Frankly, he doesn't have as much of a need for NATO in his mind, especially with what they've been doing to still stay with Iran when it comes to the nuclear agreement. The idea that nation states have their own interests, they should have their own borders and control the flow of immigration, etc., that they have that they should not be held hostage to what the UN says, to what the ICC says if you're in the United States camp. Or, in this case, when I brought this up, of nationalism, this is something that they do latch on to when they understand. The idea that, hey, wait a second, they've been trying to have Palestinians make peace. They're not making peace. And a lot of the Arab states are saying, look, I have my own interests. Why am I going to sit here and wait for Palestinian leaders who are living quite well and really have no incentive to engage in negotiations to begin with? Why am I waiting for them? Why do I need to have them veto what's in my interest? What's in my interest, if you're in the UAE or Bahrain, is I want better deals with the United States. I want security guarantees. I want to work with Israel because obviously Israel gets the most preferential treatment from the United States. So the more I can drape myself with what Israel is receiving, the better it is for my future and for my people. And the Palestinians, frankly, on a leadership level, could have played all of this different. And it's really, I hate to use the phrase because it's so overused, the never missing an opportunity to miss an opportunity. But here it's not even like missing the opportunity, which of course it is, and that we all know. It's that it's like a choose your own adventure book, but like imagine giving it to someone and yet every single time they come to like the question at the bottom of the page, they take the wrong choice. You know, it's time and time again. You could have done a number of things that would have resulted in, say, the Arab League summit a couple days ago, having a totally different tone and tenor to it, having it would have taken place as an emergency session as the Palestinians wanted. Instead, they have this, and the leadership is shouting into the wind, and a lot of the Gulf countries and states are saying, whatever, you know, sorry.
Right. Some people just want to move ahead, and other people don't. And the Palestinians want to. And let's not use the word Palestinians because it's not really fair. Because we're talking about Palestinian leadership as opposed to Palestinian people that I meet all the time that are jealous. They told me last Thursday night, I had a meeting with Palestinians from Hebron. They said, we're jealous of the UAE. We want to move ahead. We want to start normalizing relations. But there's these people who rule us, and they are corrupt, and they are into endless war. This is how they make their living, and they have no interest, as you said just now, they have no interest in, quote unquote, making peace. They just don't have an interest in progress and moving ahead. But we, the people, are suffering. And then that's why, in many ways, this UAE-Bahrain-Israel Abraham Accords sheds a very bad light on the Palestinian leadership, and they're feeling it. They're feeling the heat. Okay, so Matt, you have a golden ticket. You have a golden ticket to a special event, and you know, there's the cynical types. Maybe they're not cynical. Maybe I shouldn't prejudge. There's the types that say this is all about a Trump re-election. This is what this is about. This is the gift that Trump wanted to give the conservative, especially evangelical group, show them that he's moving ahead for Israel, with Israel. In lieu of sovereignty, this is a great gift to them right before elections. So that's, you know, one camp. Also, here in Israel, that same thinking goes, Netanyahu's got all kinds of troubles. He's got court cases. He's got other things. He's got corona. Okay, let's give him something. In answer, the head of the Mossad issued a statement today saying, listen, this is a long, long process in the making. We've worked very, very hard to make this happen. This is not something that just comes, you know, it didn't start last week. This is a process that he himself and Netanyahu have been engaged in for a long time. And yeah, okay, it's an election cycle for President Trump. Let's help him out. But it's certainly in our interest and in the Emiratis' interest and the regional interest to move this ahead at this time. So how do you see Abraham Accords at this time? And are you excited for having that golden ticket tomorrow?
First, I'm very excited to have the ticket. To answer your other question, no interview I've done on this topic, no matter what the network, can resist asking precisely that. Is this just to boost Trump's chances and to shore up his base and that? Look, the reality is this. Yes, this has been worked on for a long period of time, but we have to recall Jared Kushner, Jason Greenblatt at the time, what they wanted to do was put the peace plan out well over a year and a half ago. What ended up happening were 3 Israeli elections that froze the process, at least for the Americans to release it, and then the pandemic since March. So soon, none of that could get squared away. The fact is, the Trump administration's idea was to have this all done, and this normalization process, which is supposed to accompany it, the peace process, whether or not Palestinians engaged or not, or the leadership did. This was all supposed to happen beforehand. Now, the fact is they made a lot of progress. I can't say whether or not it entered into their head that, well, if Biden wins, then they're going to try to reverse everything because Biden is pretty much pledged to what I see as a incredibly defunct and backward view of foreign policy. So if you're the White House, you decide maybe you put it out anyways, but this isn't one of those things where, the president is sitting around and he's like, someone make that happen, and then they just cobbled this together. I mean, you don't get Arab states to cobble things together. The Middle East is more like Treants or Treebeard from The Lord of the Rings, and let's not be hasty all the time.
And you're right that something like this doesn't come together easily. I mean, one of the most shocking aspects of this deal or accord has been that little like caveat thing, which is the flyovers over Saudi Arabia. It's like Israel's going to fly over Saudi Arabia. That's been like a taboo thing. And our airplanes have had to fly in crazy ways. Let's say, for example, to India, down the Red Sea and around like this and just, in crazy paths. And very quietly, Mohammed bin Salman, MBS, says, yeah, it's okay. I can have blue and white fly over Mecca. It's cool. I can deal with that. And to me, that was like, whoa, like that was one of the biggest signals. The other one was also the meeting of the Arab League that you mentioned. And I think that what they're saying is, yeah, I like how you put it from an American perspective. From your side, the way you see it is, we want more of America's favors. That's interesting. And from my perspective, it's like we want regional trade. We want Israeli defense as maybe a defense contractor for the United States regionally. We want more normalization around here, more tourism, more medicine, more access to all that kind of stuff, and we need defense from Iran. But tell me about that moment. Like, what are you thinking, and what are you hearing about the Saudis, the Saudi question, which is really one of the leaders of the Arab world, more than the Emiratis and the others. The Saudis. Wow, that's Saudi Arabia. That's like the essential Arabs, and somehow they're winking or nodding, saying we're part of this thing.
Right. So you don't get Bahrain specifically, but also to an extent the Emiratis to go along with this without the blessing of Saudi Arabia, which is also diplomatically smart if you're Saudi Arabia, which frankly has internal issues that are different than the much smaller Emiratis and Bahrain. So it's good that they are going along this path. I imagine as the custodian of the two holy mosques in Mecca, the symbolism of them literally making this kind of deal is a bit of a bridge too far at the moment. I think everything is lining up in that direction when it happens. We'll see. I quote Bernard Lewis when it comes to predicting the future, and he always says that it's hard enough to predict the past. So I can't say when I think that this is going to happen, but it strikes me that of the Gulf Cooperation Council camp, that is Saudi Arabia, Bahrain, the Emiratis, also you're talking Sunni powers such as Egypt, Jordan to an extent, and other Gulf countries, specifically not Qatar and not Turkey. I imagine that you would have Saudi Arabia be the last of those countries while everyone else goes first, kind of like the, like if you're the king or whatever, and you're going to allow everyone else to go test the water first before they get in. Plus, when they do that, it's the largest symbolic thing, which again, I understand for a lot of Israelis. They think, oh, okay, good. You notice that we exist and you're allowing us to fly over. To an extent, it's like you've recognized gravity. It exists whether you've recognized it or not, but whatever, thank you. I understand that. But still, the way the region works, this is actually a big deal. And obviously, it's great for Israel and cutting down travel time.
No, I don't want to give the perception that Israelis don't think that the Saudi thing is a big deal. I thought of it the opposite. I thought that was exactly that. It was a signal of large proportions, saying it's a wink and a nod. It says, we stand with this thing, and that's how it felt like. And we've already known that Mohammed bin Salman symbolizes a modernization of Saudi Arabia, and I you know what I mean. To me, El Al flying over Saudi Arabia is like that's a pretty big deal, not a small deal.
It's not only a big deal, but also maintaining, allowing Saudi Arabia to come to this conclusion on its own, weighing out what it knows are its internal dynamics, is extremely important. The United States has demonstrated time and again that we're just pretty bad when it comes to knowing all the internal dynamics inside of countries. And, we've had grand ideas of, we'll take this guy, we'll take him away, and everything will be fine. We've learned the hard way that that's not the way it is. So we have an ally who has a reform plan in Saudi Arabia with MBS, and they are going to go about this at their own pace, 2030. The other important aspect is that making sure that they do this at the right pace is huge, because if you step back and you look at what has been called the global war on terror, which obviously is a war on ideology, it's not a war on the tactic of bombings, it's to change the ideology. The only way that happens is when Islam deals with Islam. That's not something that Israel can do. It's not something the United States can do. And that is the more important meta issue, that by allowing Saudi Arabia to go in this direction and to welcome it, to frankly not slap its hand every chance that we have, as some in Washington certainly would like to do, that will pay the biggest dividends for, I think, all of Western civilization, frankly, for the whole world in general.
You're saying big things right now. You're talking about a mind change within the Islamic civilization, and we're seeing that potential. Certainly accepting Israel and aligning with America is very different than the jihadist / Soviet non-aligned alliance. That's a very different type of alliance for sure. And what you're also hinting at is that there needs to be Muslim or Islamic answers to be able to deal with Israel and other things, and to just really yearn to modernize and to come into the family of nations. Interestingly enough, I found actually a statement by the Lubavitcher Rebbe. And the Lubavitcher Rebbe said that the Arabs are going to come into a consciousness down the line where like other industrialized nations, that they're going to realize that the cost of war is too much and it's retarding their progress, and that they're going to indeed want peace with Israel without Israeli concessions, because they're just going to realize that it's just in their self-interest. But you're saying also that there needs to come a kind of Islamic ideology around that. And I guess that leads me to the next question, which is, okay, we have, maybe it's not stated, but there's a new axis. It's the Emiratis, the Bahrainis, maybe a few other countries, the Moroccans, the Sudanese. We'll see what else. And, the Saudis tacitly saying that they're on board with America and Israel. That's an alignment. That's an axis. But there's a different axis right now, which includes Iran, Qatar, Turkey, and then small groups, Iranian subgroups like Hamas, and then the Muslim Brotherhood. I meant the subgroup of Hezbollah, and then Muslim Brotherhood of Hamas. So you have these, let's call them, for the sake of our conversation, recalcitrant forces, jihadist forces of various ilks, or I wouldn't call Turkey jihadists. I would call them neo-Ottoman, right? Like right, so you have these old, like the Turkish Empire, the Iranian, the Persian Empire trying to come back up again. And I don't know, like there's a sense, if people are paying attention to it, that there could be a war between Turkey and Greece over the Mediterranean issue, that could strike. So these guys are feeling hot under the collar, seeing this new alignment with Arab and Muslim folks that used to be more on their side. So how do you think the bad guys are, from my perspective, well, let's put it this way, the guys on the other side of the line, should we call them bad guys or enemies, or maybe we should use softer terms, but the Qataris, the Iranians, the Turks, or the Erdogans, how are they feeling at this moment, do you think?
Well, I mean, look, Iran, of course, is easy. That's they're very unambiguous with where they stand and what they think. Then you have Qatar, which is supporting the Muslim Brotherhood throughout the region, kind of bankrolling Turkey, and has the most powerful or most watched news network in Al Jazeera. To an extent, they play all sides. On one hand, they did learn to step that up a lot during the Obama administration because, of course, it was in fashion for the Obama administration to promote the Muslim Brotherhood, as he did with Mohammed Morsi in Egypt. And so it made sense for Qatar, which it is very much out of step with the current administration's view of the region. And then you have, which is more interesting to me somehow, is Turkey, which really doesn't offer much of anything. They rely on Qatar, so that's the big brother in this scenario. And they're rejectionists. They came out completely against the Abraham Accords. Oh, it's a horrible thing, and Erdogan cursing it. Never mind the fact that they actually have, on paper, normalized relations with Israel for a while, right? So they're actually accusing the UAE and Bahrain, how dare they do what we did a long time ago? So they're two-faced about it, frankly. And that's a different struggle. Yes, it's a neo-Ottoman thing that Erdogan is trying to recreate, and he's trying to basically compete with Russia and Iran and use them at the same time. And they do this in Libya and throughout Africa and other places. They're the ones that tend to cause headaches for us. And with Russia, I think one of the new things that the Trump administration learned, I guess, when it came in, was the idea that, hey, you know what? We don't actually need to solve everything. That's a new thinking. In the United States, for decades, you don't touch anything unless you are going to have the solution, and then you stay until you solve it. These people that we're talking about and dealing with, and again, like you say, whether you want to call them enemies, adversaries, frenemies, whatever, they're under no illusion that they need to solve things. From their perspective, they look at the United States, they see that we are the lead power, and what they need to do is take us down a few notches. They don't need to solve the problem in order to do that. So we don't actually, if we stop looking, as we have, at the idea that we must solve everything, it really is a bit liberating and allows us to focus on making deals that will set up the future for better deals. Incidentally, for a reason that's exactly as you described, that I heard today and yesterday, and I have a feeling I'll hear it tomorrow from Arab spokesmen. The idea of you talking about how life in reality is with Palestinians, which is totally different than the news media present it, or how Palestinians are jealous of, some of them are jealous of these kind of deals. The economy that's being focused on, that Kushner's plan was focusing on for everyday Palestinians. The things that the Emiratis, that other Arab spokesmen are now speaking about, is how this is the type of thing that will improve day-to-day relations, that will improve the day-to-day life for Palestinians, for Arabs, people who get up in the morning and it doesn't matter to them the latest decree from the leader. What matters more is, can they get to work? Do they have a job? Are they going to be able to put food on the table? That's the same anywhere, especially in the Middle East. This kind of moves things in that direction. And it was interesting because I actually thought of you as I heard them saying this, because I thought to myself, this is kind of what you've been saying. And in that regard, you take what seems or can be portrayed as a small deal here, but you create conditions, you create momentum, a train that is moving that is hard to roll back and unwind, or as other people call it, a fact on the ground. It becomes more of a habit, and that will lead to better things in the future, I think.
Right. I just want to give you an example, Matt, that my sister studies at the Weizmann Institute. Actually, she's doing her postdoc there, and she sent me a press release within the Weizmann Institute, which says the Weizmann Institute, which is one of the Middle East's leading scientific institute, if not the leading one, says it signs a memorandum of understanding with Mohammed bin Zayed University of Artificial Intelligence in the UAE. Like there's been no time wasted in making deals, like real deals, like flight deals, university deals. Like it's as though there's been a tremendous pent up hunger for progress and moving forward. And you know, I saw Jared Kushner being interviewed on the airplane when they were heading over to the UAE. So they're like, you know, the reporters asked him a question. So he goes, "Look, we're not politicians. We come from the business world. We're deal makers." And it's a great alternative language that has been brought into play, and it's very useful. And again, as I began, it sidesteps some of the thorny issues, the religious issues, the Palestinian issue, all that. It's just sidestepping it and coming to things that people really do want, and that's very powerful. Speaking of language, Abraham Accords. For me, this is a very important term. As the spokesman for the Jewish community of Hebron, where Abraham is buried, the term Abraham is a very powerful term. And I wrote an article explaining that this term counteracts the term occupation. If the term occupation means that Israelis are foreigners in this region, the term Abraham means we're an ancient people together with the Arabs. There's something that brings us together. There's something that is joint. We have a joint father. And I just want to give a real shout out and thumbs up to the term Abraham Accords, which is, to me, as a person concerned with language, is one of the big victories, along with the deals that we just talked about. Just the term itself is a great narrative victory. What do you think about that?
You're exactly right, and that's also something that I've seen media leaning into on the Arab side as well, saying that when it comes to justifying, look, we should be sharing the region. They have a long history. We each come from the same father. Look, this is a normal thing. It's a natural thing. It gives a kind of a permission structure for them to discuss it, but it also, as it turns out, happens to be the truth. So I think it was a great formulation as well.
Just for a second, I just want you to know that on this live broadcast, I'm broadcasting to Facebook, to YouTube, and to Twitter. On Twitter, there's an army of warriors that want to besmirch Israel. So this guy here, just to put it up on the screen, his name is Musty. What is it? Musty One. I read Musty Stone. That made more sense. He said, "Original Jews are brothers with Muslims, but New Order Jews are just Nazis." So you have out there
Jews without ideas, the dumb Jews, kind of like Europeans, they have no problem commemorating the dead Jews. It's the ones that are alive they have more problems with. Right.
But what you're saying is that you've even seen Arab media talking about the Abraham Accords in the other way, which is, yes, let's recognize that. And that's part of also what we said before, what you said a minute ago, which we talked about, an Islamic ideology. Just by using the terminology of Abraham about the Jews, that is putting in place an idea that the Jews are an Abrahamic people and that we can come together. By the way, for Jews who are also suspicious of Arabs, it reminds them of the famous story that it was Ishmael and Isaac. Actually, the Torah records, or the Bible records it as Isaac and Ishmael buried together, their joint father in Hebron. They came together for this thing to honor their father. So even for Jews who are skeptical, the term Abraham is very useful to bring the Arabs into a better light, a better focus. I guess it goes without saying that some people in the world that I live in are concerned also with what was promised to be Israeli sovereignty originally by Netanyahu in 3 elections and has now been ostensibly frozen. And instead of the sovereignty, we're getting reports, unconfirmed reports by people from the Israeli left saying that Netanyahu has promised to freeze Israeli growth in the Jewish communities in Judea and Samaria, the so-called settlements. And I guess I have to ask that question, like, do you think that's true, that Israel had to sell a stopping of expansion in Judea and Samaria? Or conversely, is this really lip service for just to give some of the Arab leaders an out to be able to say, yes, well, at least we stopped this? And I'll add to that, if you can't answer that question because of your position, I can understand that as well.
Well, I mean, thanks. What I can say is that there's no change in the administration policy. Now, that's the Diplo speak. The fact is, this does put on hold immediate annexation. But if you go back to the agreement, the Peace to Prosperity plan that was put out, it discusses a time frame by which Palestinians need to kind of start doing things. So if, as I said at the beginning of our conversation, it's not just that Palestinians missed an opportunity, but they've chosen poorly at every fork in the road along the way. If the ultimate goal, the only people who can actually change the direction that the train, so to speak, seems to be moving would be Palestinians waking up, or leadership waking up and starting to sound, frankly, how they don't sound, which is very reasonable to at least Western ears or to Israeli ears, in a way that would seem that a compromise can be reached. Beyond that specifically, I can't get into things that I've heard, but I think that, frankly, as you've said, it doesn't take Israeli sovereignty issues off the table. It simply punts it in the direction. I'll also answer it this way. Kushner's team didn't get into this to begin with thinking, well, we'll put down a peace plan and the Palestinians will come to the table, we'll make peace, and that'll be that. And then we'll think of a few things afterwards. They thought to themselves, and have been told along the way by many, that, most likely thing that they'll say no, and they'll behave this way or try to do this way, down to the very technical thing of exactly what their reactions would be on a day-to-day basis after the peace prosperity agreement was put forward. This is something that they've realized. Look, if they're not going to engage, then we'll keep moving. It doesn't close the door. I would also say to you something that the team has learned from going to multiple capitals and speaking about issues such as Jerusalem, when you're talking borders, and that this is not something that is actually very well understood in a map type sense around the region. There's the idea of what it is, Jerusalem, Al-Quds, or the Haram al-Sharif, as they call it, and what Al-Aqsa Mosque is. And that. There's not really an understanding of what that geographically looks like. It doesn't exist in Europe either. Obviously doesn't exist in Hollywood. It doesn't exist like that elsewhere. So when it comes time to start dealing with those issues, because Palestinians decide that they're done kicking themselves and would like to join and catch up, at that point, you're then going to have these type of discussions, Israelis amongst Israelis, and frankly, Arabs and Palestinians amongst themselves, because at this point, when it's brought up in interviews with other Arab guests about what the future is going to look like I said a couple weeks ago, it had been the Arab Peace Initiative, which is essentially no Jerusalem for any Jews, 1967 borders, return of refugees, basically. That's the starting point, which this administration said, thank you, that's nice, but not 2002 anymore. And these are different times. That's not what they're saying now. So what the Arab position on what constitutes a fair deal amongst Palestinians and Israelis, we've yet to see that actually in the future, in however long it is before these type of negotiations were to happen. But I've also heard one-state ideas from Arabs themselves. And again, I think to myself, this is something that I'm not going to wade into in detail on TV about exactly how that one state operate, what rights are we talking, exactly Jewish character of a state. But that's something that is, the first seeds have been planted somehow in a way that it used to just be like, reading the card. It's got to be a 2002 Arab Peace Initiative, check all these boxes, regardless of whether that's actually possible.
Your answer, Matt, was a good answer, but I just want to kind of sharpen one thing, though, which is I didn't ask you about the Palestinians. I'm talking about Jewish yearnings for our land, and which is from what I represent. I have to speak on that. Meaning to say, I'm not talking about Palestinian rights and Palestinian future and Palestinian negotiation and recalcitrance or not. I'm talking about what we yearn for, which is to be sovereign in the historic biblical heartland of the Jewish people. And I'm just saying, I'm talking to you as a representative of the administration. I'm just saying, hey, like with regarding to those guys and what their problem is, that's one issue. But I'm talking yearning for what we've wanted, what we've pushed for. And it turns out that wherever Israel has really managed to hold on to is where has been recognized, if it's the Golan Heights or Jerusalem, or the recognition that Jewish presence in Judea and Samaria is not illegal under international law by the Pompeo Doctrine, Pompeo Declaration. Those have been great victories and very important ones. All right, we're talking and we're finishing up our conversation with Matthew Brodsky, who has over 2 decades of experience in U.S. foreign policy and national security, especially about the Middle East. He's briefed everybody, and many times in Washington, I catch him on the way to the White House or on other important places, including the National Security Council and the State Department, where he currently assists on policy and communications strategy to promote the Trump administration's foreign policy agenda, and along with many very important articles and a great Twitter feed as well. Matt, I just want to tell you again that I feel that you are lucky to be amongst the folks that are going to be on the White House lawn tomorrow. And I hear that the weather is good. Is that right?
Yeah, it's unbelievable because August is known in DC as just swamp humidity. Today it was in the mid 70s, around 20 Celsius. It's going to be the same tomorrow, sunny but not horrible. This is going to be a South-lawn experience in the White House. Yeah, I mean, you could have had something where everyone's dressed up in a suit and the schwitz is just pouring.
So listen, have a great time at the Abraham Accords, and please remember that we're sending you blessings from the tomb of Abraham and the forefathers and mothers in Hebron. And please send our regards and say hi to all the friends. We'll be watching you on TV here from Israel, and I'll be sure to look out for you again. Maybe I'll take a picture of you so you'll see how you look on Israeli TV. This is a big day, and please, I'm comfortable telling you that even amongst these so-called settlers, and certainly on Twitter all over the place, I see a lot of excitement and hope for this, and that's great because this world is right now has a lot of divisiveness and Corona and other issues that are striking at people. And this Abraham Accords is really a sign of hopefulness, and I hope that it's going to be blessed tomorrow. Matt, thanks so much for being with us. Have a great time.
Thank you. Pleasure to be with you again.
All right. Thank you so much for being with us, Matt. And thank you, folks, for being with me here on the Yishai Fleisher Show. How much fun are we having by talking about the issues that matter so much to the Middle East and to the future? And if you're on my side, not everybody is, let's send blessings to Washington and to leaders instead of cursing leaders, which is what the media does so often. Let's try hard to actually send blessings to leaders and really pray. Hey, did you think about taking just a few minutes today and putting in a good prayer that tomorrow will go well and that will mean the beginnings of new tidings for this region and for the children of Abraham. And with that, I want to wish you a shalom and blessings for a Shana Tova, happy new Jewish year, which is indeed important for all those people who believe and have a part in the God of Israel. So Shana Tova to all of you. A happy new year. Write me an email, yishai@yishaifleisher.com. Check out yishaifleisher.com for articles, videos, podcasts, and ways to connect. Looking forward to being with you more. Thanks so much, and blessings from the land of blessings. Shalom.